ora iti whanau, and welcome to our first podcast here at Be Mental. My name is Tamihana, and I'm going to be your host as we talk all things mental health. And to start off our very first podcast, I'm just going to talk about just a little bit about my journey and how I basically recovered from depression, where my depression started, and so way back, I guess starting back when I was a professional dancer, I trained as a professional dancer at quite a late age. So I had a lot of catching up to do to be able to meet my goals. I wanted to be able to have a career at a high level. And one of the people that really inspired me, that I saw, that kind of solidified that decision for me, was a gentleman called Douglas Wright. And he was one of New Zealand's most kind of famous contemporary dancers and choreographers. And I saw a solo that he did. It was on TV. I think it was on one of the arts programs. I was only about, I think, 19 at the time. I'm very late for a dancer who hasn't danced up until then. But he really inspired me, just the way that he could speak a language. It was very melancholy, I think, that, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. I was really attracted to that melancholy kind of feel. He was dancing about his struggle with AIDS and death, or the idea of that one, his own mortality, I guess. And it was very powerful, and it talked a lot and to me. So that inspired me, and so I just went to a dance school, and I got directed this way and directed that way. I ended up spending 4 years in tertiary education to become a dancer. And I was kind of picked out to be asked to join quite a well-known dance company here in New Zealand. I was very fortunate and very lucky, because most dancers tend to have to go overseas to be able to do that. So I was very driven. I was a very driven young man at that time, and I guess I still am. And nothing would deter me from my goal of wanting to be a professional dancer. And so I kind of had reached that point when what I thought at the time, and that was joining this company. And this is where things started to go a little bit sideways for me. So the pressure of performing at a high level, the feedback that you got after each performance, you had to be on 24/7. You didn't have a life, so you turned up for practice or rehearsals. You had to be there at least half an hour early. You had to warm up. You had choreography to learn. You had choreography to generate. You had sponsors. You had to be at the forefront. And I was I naturally am quite a shy person. And so this was a lot to take on. There was also expectations inside the group that you had to be a certain way as well. So, and I found there wasn't much leadership there to kind of guide a young man through that process. You either sink or swim. So I learned a few hard lessons around that point. So I was pretty green as well. I just come out of home, even though I've been out in the wilderness for 4 years, kind of at tertiary education. I was still pretty young at heart. I didn't fully know how the world worked on a social sense, on a kind of a professional sense. So I was learning as I went, learning some hard lessons along the way. So I had no one to really guide me through that process. Even when you're in a tight-knit group, The place that I was at was very male dominant. It was very, you had the typical Kiwi bloke attitudes. Funny enough, in this company, and there were some things in there that there was, as I reflected back on, that wasn't, right. And one of them was there was a bullying culture there in this company, and at that time I didn't have a lot of my own self-worth about myself, and I took a lot of things on the chin. To be honest, I was bullied in there at times, not all the time, but there were definite periods where I thought this was quite terrible, and it started to create fear going to work. I would kind of wake up in the morning going, having to take a deep breath in and have this kind of fear going to work. And so that was one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it definitely was the expectation to get things perfect as a professional dancer, and at a high level, 24/7. So you weren't allowed to take a minute off. You had to be, when you're on stage or when you're rehearsing and trying to get it right, you had to get it right. And if you didn't get it right, especially in this company, then you were made to repeat it over and over again, not with kindness in heart, but with, like, if you don't get it right, then you're a bad person. Well, why are you not getting it right, kind of thing. So that was the type of mentality there. I wasn't that way 100% of the time, but it was quite a lot of the time. And I remember one time over in Massachusetts, over in the United States, we were rehearsing. We were at a place. We were performing at the time. We were rehearsing during the day, and there was just this one movement or thing that we couldn't get. There's a group of 3 of us, and the choreographer just kept hammering us hour after hour, it felt like, and we just couldn't get it. We just couldn't click as a group. And now whether that was us or the way that we taught, I don't know, but we didn't click. Okay. And so it was kind of like, as punishment, he took us out into the paddock and made us run around and do these drills for like hours, trying to exhaust us as punishment. And I reflect back on that, and I just think that is the most ridiculous or unfair thing to do to a group of grown men who are professionals, who are trying their hardest to get something right. And then, even though we couldn't get it, and we had trouble getting it, we were punished for it. And and that was just one example of a mild example as well of one of the things that we went through. And so all these kind of things kind of added up to, and I started getting anxiety, and I didn't know what it was at the time. I would wake up in the morning and I would be freaking out even before I jumped in the shower to go to work. And so this went on for a few years, crazy enough, about 3 or 4 years. And it just got to a point, and actually the whole company got to the point where we just went, this is enough. This is not good. This is not healthy. And it was at one point where, towards the end of my stay there, where, I was looking for an out. And I made it pretty clear. in my own way. I wasn't confident enough to say at the time, but I made it pretty clear that I was no longer invested in the vision of what that workplace was about. And so I left, and it was great for a period of time. So for a period of time, it was great. But there was these lingering issues that had stayed with me, that had become a habit for myself, and I didn't know what they were, and so I found a partner. We got married. It wasn't a perfect relationship, and these things started to build up in my life. I wasn't happy. I wasn't in a job that I wanted because I had just given up something that I had loved so dearly. And, that takes when you let something go that you're really passionate about and close to your heart, there's a sense of grieving. I didn't really knew I was going through that process. There was something else I was dealing with as well, as I kind of had to make, I didn't even know, I had to make peace with that or grow from that. And I guess you look in the media now, and and there's these companies that deal with athletes and sports professionals to create a life after what you've actually done. Whether you're a professional rugby player or a professional Olympian, like going to the Olympics. And I just read an article recently about getting over the Olympics as well, and the mental health, that aspects. And I was going through that for myself, but I didn't realize that, that loss, that sense of feeling like you're a failure, that you could have done better, or why weren't things working out for me? And so there was another layer of things that I had to work through. So at this point, I had left the company, the dance company. I kind of worked freelance for a little bit. I met a person, we got married, and that relationship was very rocky from the outset. And there were some good times there, but there were just some things there that I guess that we weren't compatible with. And looking back in retrospect, you can see them now. And around the end, towards the end of this relationship, this is when my anxiety and fears and depression really started to come to the forefront. And I remember sitting in the car, just sitting there, just so lost, didn't know what to do, feeling empty inside. And I just started banging my head against the steering wheel. I didn't know what to do. I was feeling all these emotions. I also was feeling very alone and very, I guess, afraid, because I didn't know what was going on, and I was really scared, frustrated, and lost. And my partner at the time, my ex-wife, she stopped, and she just instantly just knew there was something, that was right. Obviously, when you see someone banging their head against the steering wheel, there's something wrong. But I thank you for this as well. And she got me to the doctor straight away, and that was the start of my healing. Now, I wouldn't say it was. It was the catalyst, I guess, the initial catalyst of the start of my healing. But it took a little bit of time for me to really encompass or acknowledge the idea that I had depression. I had a lot of, for me, I had a lot of stigma around what it meant to be depressed and mental health. people going to look at me differently, and they're going to put me in this box, so they're going to put me in the kind of insane asylum. I had all these thoughts coming into my head. I didn't really, what is this thing, depression? Is it what I was feeling? And, I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. And so, so I started the process there. And this doctor put me on medication straight away and got me counseling. So I believe in using medication to help, but I believe at that point the doctor should perhaps said, go and see the counsellor first before I give you that medication. But she gave it to me straight away, and also, pills to help me sleep. And again, looking back, I would say the more healthier way would be to go, no, don't give me the medication or the sleeping pills yet. Let me go and see a counsellor first and try and work through this, and then get counselled through it, and then in collaboration with my counsellor and GP, and then they should have made that decision to put me on medication. Now, I'm not saying this because I think medication is wrong. I just think there should have been a slower way for me to actually go on to medication for my depression, because I believed for a small period of time there that medication helped me. But I know it can become a crux for some people, and they rely on it. And I experienced that for a good, I reckon, 6, perhaps even 12 months, where I kind of went, and I just relied on the medication to even me out. So I wish things were done differently, because looking back now, I believe I could have used the medication in collaboration with a counsellor and gone through it a little bit more succinctly. But that's looking back in retrospect. I mean, it all worked out in the end of the day. The thing is, I accept my depression now, and I appreciate it, because I'm kind of jumping here to my point, but if it wasn't for depression, I wouldn't be the more rounded individual and person that I am now, because it made me go, stop giving to everyone else, take a moment to breathe, and put myself first, and to ask for help. And that's the one thing out of all of that, that was the biggest thing that I learned, is to put myself first and to ask for help. I can't, and that can take some time. I went through like 3 counsellors, or 4 counsellors actually, a move of cities, a breakup of marriage, a let go of relationships, to find a place that I felt safe, and that was to return home. And I have to thank my brother for this. And I'll do another podcast actually around this, going home and how healing that can be. I went home, and my brother and his partner took me under their wing, and they let me be okay not to be okay. And that was so refreshing. That was like, I can breathe now, because before I felt like I couldn't be okay. I couldn't be okay in this city. I couldn't be okay in this relationship. There were things always kind of being pointed at me. I couldn't be okay with myself in that environment. But as soon as I moved home, as soon as I connected with family and my big brother, I could breathe. And like I said, I'll go into that a little bit more deeply about my journey through that period. But that was just a quick outline about how my journey started, So thanks for joining me on today's podcast, the very first podcast, just an introduction about my depression and how I first came to find the light, that first step to getting well. So I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to Be Mental Podcasts and to our Soul platform, and you can get our free podcast there, and also some free yoga and wellness content there as well. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Namaste.